Hey friends, welcome back to my sewing room. My name is Becca, and in today's video, we're going to kick off the 4-part series for the mystery Boo Crew Quilt Along. This is actually really cute. I'm usually not a big Halloween fan, but really excited to tackle this. A few of you have emailed me and asked if I would do this sew along on my channel and that you would have loved the opportunity to sew it with me. So of course I said yes. But unfortunately, when the actual sew along was happening back in July, in fact, Quarter Shop's website, I didn't have the bandwidth to be able to make the video. So I decided to do it in the month of September anyway. It just felt like it would help get me in that autumn Halloween mood. And so every Wednesday in the month of September, we're going to drop one of the 4 videos that walk us through making this mini quilt. There should or may still be kits available. I don't know as of the recording of this video, but I will check. If there are kits available, I will link them in the first comment down below this video, and I will absolutely link to the pattern for week 1, which is free, in the first comment down below this video. So if this is something you want to do and you didn't do it with Fat Quarter Shop and you're trying to get in the Halloween mindset, this might be a project for you. Before we get started, I do want to give you a little tip about how I'm going to keep all of my things organized. Take a look. A friend of mine gave me a handful of these little binder zipper pouches that are really nice and thick. They're very substantial. They've got a zipper enclosure across the top. And then over here on the side, there are 3 holes in this sleeve that allow you to put it down into a binder. And she suggested this is a great way for her to actually store all of her kit items. It's kind of genius. What she does is any pattern that is associated with that week, that month, whatever section of her kit is in the little envelope, and all of her cutout pieces are labeled and put in here as well. And that allows her to kind of take all of her items for an entire kit and put them in a binder and then set it up on her shelf. So she doesn't have to deal with a plastic bin. She's got everything cut out with the pattern in a binder, and then she could just pick up her binder and start working on things. I thought this was genius. I don't know if this system would work for all of my projects, but certainly a week over week mystery program where I have 1 pattern per week with pre-cut and labeled fabrics, this is genius for. So I wanted to share that with you. If you want to pick these up, I will put a link to this on Amazon in the first comment down below the video. So this is what I'm going to be working with. We're going to pull off week number 1 and get started. Okay, so let's open up our pouch, get our pattern. And all of our pieces. And we're going to start putting this together. We're going to grab F and M. We're going to make a flying geese unit for our hat. To make a flying geese unit, I'm putting a square on top of my rectangle fabric. I'm going to press that fabric back up on top of itself so that I have something that looks like this. I will trim off this excess and then repeat that on the other side. When I'm sewing these together, I'm putting the corner of this fabric at the needle, and I'm putting the corner of the fabric that's down here close to me right on the red line of my diagonal seam tape. And I'm just going to watch this bottom corner and make sure that it stays on that mark as I'm sewing all the way through. And that's going to help make sure that my seam is nice and straight. Once I'm done sewing, I can push this fabric up and over to make sure that it completes this corner perfectly, both from the top and from the back. As I've mentioned in some of my other sew along videos, if you do the stitch and flip method and you flip it over and you find that your piece is not perfectly completing that little corner, then you know that you didn't sew it directly on that diagonal line. If it's too small from the front, that means you were to the left of the diagonal. And if it's too big from the front, that means you were to the right of the diagonal. So you may need to adjust. Now we have the flying geese for the top of our hat. In our next step, we're going to grab our fabric L rectangle and one of our fabric I squares, and we're going to put the fabric I square in the upper right position of our fabric L. And we just want to make sure that this is along the 4.5 inch side of the fabric. And we're going to take a stitch and flip seam right here, which just means we're going to sew from one corner to the other, just like we did with our flying geese unit. We're going to flip it back, make sure it completes that upper corner. And then if it does, we'll trim off the excess, press it, and there you go. That's the second part of our hat. Now we're going to sew these two pieces together and press up towards the top of the hat. Now we should have something that looks like this. And in the next step, we're going to grab our fabric G and attach it to the right side of what we just built, and that should fit nice and perfectly. Since I do have a point here that I want to kind of keep an eye on, I'm going to sew this with my fabric G strip on the bottom and my piece block that I'm assembling it to on the top. And that's going to allow me to kind of eyeball that point and make sure that I keep my needle just to the right of the intersection of where that point on my flying geese unit is. Once that's put together, we'll bring it over here and press it over towards fabric G. We should have something that looks like this. Give it a nice good press. It's always a good idea to work with flat pieces. That helps your blocks go together a little bit more precisely. We're going to set this aside and work on the middle part of our hat. For this, we're going to need a fabric K rectangle, as seen here, and another one of those lovely fabric I squares. We're going to lay it out so that the 5.5 inch is on the top and bottom. And we're going to put our fabric I square in the upper left-hand position. And we're going to take a seam from the corner to the other corner, do another stitch and flip, just like we did with the other pieces. This is our middle hat unit. And you guessed it, it's going to go right on the bottom, just like that. There are no points to worry about with this piece. So I'm just going to make sure that my raw edges are lined up nicely. And I'm just going to take a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. We're going to press this down towards the piece that we just sewed on. I lied. There actually was a point that I could have pinned if I wanted to. But I think the hat is supposed to look a little wobbly and misshapen, and so if your point doesn't match up there, I think it's going to be okay. Now that the hat unit seems to be built, we're going to take our fabric D and we're going to put that on the other side of our unit. Take our seam right here. Now there is a point right here that if you want to preserve, you may want to pin, but like I said, I think the hat should look floppy and misshapen, so I'm not going to stress about that point. Once that's sewn on, you're going to press your seam underneath that fabric D strip. We're going to set this aside. We're going to get a fabric F square and our fabric J rectangle. We're going to lay it out so that the 7.5 inch edge is at the top and the bottom, and our fabric F square is going to go in the upper left-hand position. Just like we've done with the other pieces, we're going to do a stitch and flip from corner to corner on that fabric F square. Now we're going to grab our fabric R rectangle and we're going to place it underneath this piece and take a seam right along there. Okay, stop. I have made a bit of a boo-boo. Let me show you what I did. When I was assembling the fabric F square onto my fabric J rectangle, I put it in the upper left corner and I should have put it in the upper right corner. Now, I had already sewed it on and trimmed it off and even sewed it into the witch's hat, which is where I realized it wasn't lined up properly. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to recover from this. I've gone into my scrap bin and I've pulled out a piece of fabric that matches this piece of fabric J. I don't have enough to cut a new fabric J. So what I'm going to do is cut off enough that's going to let me sew it on the diagonal to this square, and then I'll trim up this corner. When I do that, I'm going to press the seam open so I can get that to lay nice and flat. And the only way you're really going to know is because there's going to be a seam taken there. But when the product's all pieced and quilted, nobody's really going to notice. And a witch's hat is supposed to be floppy and look a little messy, and this is just going to add to it. I'm going to cut this piece on a diagonal, and what I'm looking for is enough fabric that gives me a 1/4 inch to hold on to my square here. So I know I'm going to sew this on at an angle, so I'm just going to lob this off like that. I'm going to put this here. It doesn't have to be super accurate. We're just trying to patch it up. And then I'll take my seam. I want to remove as much of the bulk from this as I can, so I'm going to press this open. And then I will grab a ruler and a rotary cutter to re-square this up so that I have a nice clean edge here and here. And there we go. We are back in business. And then for the piece to go over here, I do need to cut a new 2.5 inch square from my background, and I'll stitch corner to corner, flip that over, and trim it off. Now I'll press that up. And this is what you should have. Now when you grab the other part of your hat, you should have something that kind of goes together like this. You have a point here that, again, if you want to have your points match up perfectly, maybe pin that. But I think witches' hats should be a little sloppy and misshapen. So I'm going to take this to my machine. I'm not going to worry too much about that point, and I'm just going to line up my raw edges, put it under the needle, and stitch. We will press this unit down. Now we're going to take our fabric C pieces, there should be 2 of them, and we're going to put one on either side of the hat, like this and this. Flip it around, grab my other fabric C, and attach it to the other side of my witch's hat. We're going to press both of those seams over underneath fabric C. And then the last step is to grab our fabric N, and we're going to put it along the bottom of our witch's hat right down here. And this is going to be pressed up towards the hat, not down towards that brim. There is our witch's hat. Now we just got to build the broom. Step 1 is going to take our fabric B and our fabric D, and we're going to make a strip set. This fabric D is going to be in the middle, and these fabric Bs will be on either side. So we're going to put these 3 together and press the seams out towards that purple fabric. I'm going to finger press this over so it's out of the way. Don't need it to be super flat for the next piece. I just need fabric B to get out of the way. I'm going to attach my next fabric B to the other side of this broom handle. We'll press this over to fabric B as well. Now I'm going to come in and give it a really good heat press. And just like that, we have our broom handle made. We'll set that aside, grab our fabric Q and another little fabric I square. In fact, we're going to need 2 of them for this step. along the long edge of our fabric queue, we're going to assemble a stitch and flip with those fabric eyes in opposite corners. So I'm going to sew from the corner here up to the corner here, flip it over, make sure everything measures nicely, and then trim off my excess. We should have something that looks like that. Our next step is going to be to grab our fabric S, and we're going to assemble this to the opposite side. So we've got our snowballed corners over here, and our fabric S is going to go on the side. We're going to press this over towards fabric S, and then we'll take our two fabric H pieces and put them on the top and bottom of that little unit. This is what we've just built, and in our next step, we're going to set that aside and grab our big fabric P, one fabric F, and two fabric I's, and we're going to snowball using the stitch and flip method 3 of the corners. We just want to make sure that we're orienting our fabric the right way when we put this together. So I'm going to do this so that it's laid out for me, and then I'll flip the mat around. I need a fabric F to be in the upper right-hand corner, and then in the opposite side, on the opposite short side, I need 2 of my fabric I's, just like that. So this is kind of what you should be working with. You're going to want to stitch corner to corner on all 3 of these pieces, and then flip it over, trim off your excess. So that's what we just built. Our next step is going to take our final fabric Q and our fabric E square, and we're going to sew the fabric E square on top of the fabric Q square, but it's going to end up being positioned over here like this. So I'm just going to take a minute to make sure that my diagonal stripes are going in the same direction. Not going to worry too much about whether or not a black and white match up next to each other. That would be way too stressful, but I think it's worth the time to make sure that I cut this out so that the stripes are all going the same way. Once we've taken that seam, we're going to press it up towards fabric E. And then we're going to put these 2 pieces together. You have a point here that you can pin if you want to make sure you don't lose. This is going to be pressed over towards the piece we just put on. And I kind of got a little lucky. I almost have my black touching my black and my white touching my white. It's not perfectly on, but pretty dang close. So that's what we have so far. Now we're going to take our fabric A square, which is our final piece, and we're going to put this down here, and we're going to do a stitch and flip from corner to corner just like that. Lots of stitch and flipping in week number 1 for the Boo Crew Mystery Quilt Along. This is going to give us a big piece of excess that you could definitely take that second seam on, so that you have a pre-sewed half square triangle unit for a scrappy future project. In fact, I think I'm just going to do that. I moved my needle over about 1/2 inch. I did not measure it. I just winged it. I just want to make sure that there was enough room so that when I cut, I have a good bit of seam allowance on my excess half square triangle unit, which you can see is looking like that. And then, of course, I have enough seam allowance in the block that I just made. We're going to press this over to this side, not size. We're going to press this over towards that piece we just sewed on. Get everything to lay really super flat. And then our final step is to put our broom together. It's going to go together like this. We're going to lay out the piece that we just made with this corner that we just stitched in the upper left-hand corner. Then we're going to grab the piece that we made before that so that the polka dot piece is touching this part. So we're starting to build the body of a broom, like the actual piece that you would use to sweep with. We're going to stitch this together. We're going to press this out away from that, what will eventually be the middle piece. So we're going to put the seam bulk underneath this part of our broom. Now we have a witch's broom and a witch's hat for the week 1 mystery Boo Crew quilt along. Although, is it really much of a mystery if this has already been released and already completed over on Fat Quarter Shop's YouTube channel? I think not. If you're sewing this along with me, I would love to know. Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget, week number 2 is going to drop next Wednesday. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you ring the bell off to the right of it so that you get a notification when the video is released. And I will see you guys all then. Bye.